Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming to this session on HIV prevention. It's actually a good turnout for a meeting that's more toward the end of the day. So in this panel, actually, we are going to highlight and feature some talks that focus on HIV prevention, risk reduction in various populations, including adolescents, men who have sex with men, opioid-dependent individuals, and I think I said men who have sex with men, but both younger and older. And we are going to be featuring a slew of mobile health devices and applications that have been used to develop some of these interventions. The four speakers will include Dr. Lynn Feline, Dr. Lynn Carroll Miller, Dr. Karen Phillips, and Dr. Sean Young. In the interest of time, because there are four speakers, we are going to go ahead and have questions at the end of all four talks. I suspect that the speakers are also open to having questions emailed and asked of them also at the end if there is not enough time. Okay? Okay, great. Without further ado, who's our first? Dr. Lynn Feline.
Good afternoon. I just want to thank the program committee for the opportunity to speak to you this afternoon. I'm going to talk to you about a tablet game that we're actually almost finished developing for risk reduction and HIV prevention in adolescents. So just as some background, I don't think this group at this conference really needs to be convinced that, that people play video games. Of note, 15 million play interactive video games, with 63% of young teens playing on a daily basis. And there's been growing and important evidence to show that video game play can impact health behaviors in terms of asthma, diabetes, eating habits and obesity, physical activity, and smoking prevention, in addition to a number of other health-related conditions. And so we turn to video games as a novel approach to risk reduction and prevention. Specifically with this background and this rationale, in 2009, 39% of new HIV infections were among individuals aged 13 to 29 years, which represented a 21% increase in incidence since the year 2006. Ethnic minorities are overrepresented in these groups, with 115 cases per 100,000 blacks and Hispanics, as opposed to 15 cases in 100,000 whites. The majority of these cases are due to sexual contact, and of note, only 7% of adolescents have engaged in sexual activity prior to age 13, and that's national data. And therefore, we saw the age group of 10 to 15-year-olds as being an optimal window of opportunity for primary HIV prevention. And so with all of that background, we applied for a grant to the National Institute of Child Health and Human Development and received funding to develop and test a video game for risk reduction and HIV prevention in at-risk teens, specifically a younger age group, 11 to 14-year-olds. So the first thing we did with the funding is we created a new program called Play to Prevent, and you can see here the Play to Prevent team. The goal behind Play to Prevent is really to develop and test evidence-based, theoretically based video games for the purposes of prevention in youth and young adults. And as you can see from this team, it's a talented, highly multidisciplinary team. On the science side, we have folks with expertise in HIV, expertise in health behavior, social psychology, community psychology, pediatrics. On the game side, we have fabulous representation from some of the best in the field, including Ben Sawyer, who is at Digital Mill, Alex Seropian, who was one of the co-founders of the Halo video game franchise, Shell Games, which is the game development team that we hired. They're in Pittsburgh. They've done a number of very successful commercial games for companies such as Disney. And then Noah Falstein, who is also a game developer out in Northern California, who has provided great consultation to this project. And probably most importantly, we've engaged some community partners, which really has been the most rewarding part of this whole process. We're in New Haven, and there are a number of programs for local youth that have after-school programs, and this include Farnham Neighborhood House, which we've partnered with from the very beginning. You can see some of the Farnham kids here, and one of the things that's really remarkable about Farnham House is they've been around for about 100 years, and they're actually folks who work there now who were Farnham kids themselves, not from 100 years ago, but more recently, and so there's a real allegiance and a real commitment to the community. We've also engaged LEAP, the Boys and Girls Club of New Haven, the McGivney Community Center, which is in Bridgeport, which is south of New Haven, and then Squash Haven, which is a program run out of one of the facilities at Yale. And so this was just a handful of programs that we've engaged and had conversations with other groups. But this whole team has really moved this process along, and will continue to work together on the evaluation of this game. So the first game to come out of Play to Prevent is Play Forward Elm City Stories, with Elm City being a shout out to New Haven, which is the Elm City. Play Forward is an interactive video game. It's been developed for the iPad, with the end goal being risk reduction and HIV prevention in young teens. And as I mentioned, it's being funded by the Eunice Kennedy Shriver National Institute of Child Health and Human Development. So part of what I wanted to talk to you about today was really what the process has been, which has really been fascinating and engaging in and of itself. So despite whatever the outcome is, the process has really been a wonderful one. We spent a considerable amount of time in the formative work doing interviews and focus groups with inner city teens aged 10 to 15. Our target audience is 11 to 14-year-olds, but we felt it was valuable to look at sort of a year before where they'd come from and the year after where they were going. We primarily did most of this work with the Farnham Neighborhood House, and we used some novel mechanisms by which to conduct this formative work, because we're talking about working with young teens, talking about some sensitive issues, risk behaviors, sex, drugs, alcohol, different challenges that they face in early adolescence. And so these are some examples of some of the techniques. Oops, sorry about that. Some of the techniques that we used some artwork, specifically the party scene picture, which I'll show you. We used a My Life timeline, which specifically relates to the game, and then we also did what we call the photo feedback project. So this was part of the artwork that we used, and we actually had to commission a graphic artist to create this piece of art, because we scoured magazines and media for a scene which would have teens in it where they weren't doing something overtly risky, and it was actually impossible to find that type of artwork. Either way, there was always something in these scenes that was very, very risky. They had, they were half dressed, or they were drinking or smoking or engaging in something. So we really had to find something that would which could potentially have risk in it, but we wanted to hear from the kids that that's how they interpreted it. So essentially we held a focus group, oh, I'm having problems with this, and showed them this picture and essentially just said, what do you think is going on here? And what we got from that was just an abundance of stories. We did focus groups primarily just with boys and then primarily just with girls, and we got very different results based on gender and really things that we would not have necessarily come up with on our own, which was really the idea. We wanted to prompt the kids, but in a very subtle way, so that they would tell us their stories. And you can see, for instance, there's back here, all the way back in the middle, you see this little girl talking to this boy. And I would say that probably the vast majority of girl focus groups said she just found out she's pregnant, and she's telling him that she's pregnant. So that was a theme that came up over and over again, completely unsolicited from us, but was obviously something that's very much on their radar and very important to them, and so something that we felt was really key to having in this game. And so this is an example of a screenshot where the story of Kayla is pregnant was built into one of our mini games. Really just sort of highlighting, taking what we heard from the kids and bringing it into the game so that it would be meaningful and it would resonate with them. Another technique we used is the My Life timeline, and part of this game, the narrative behind this game, is the idea of the player going through a number of years of their life, of adolescence, essentially from 7th to 12th grade. And so part of the goal of My Life timeline was really to get a sense of what are these kids thinking about during these different ages? How do they project forward in their timeline? What are the things that occur to them? And you can see it doesn't project great, but I'll read through it for you. So this goes from ages 11 to 21. You have at 11 you start, at 13 you have graduation, at 15 you have Sweet 15 and a job, at 17 you have your driver's license and college and go out more often. At 18 you have hair salon and a new business. At 19 you have the all-important belly button ring. And at 20 you have help out my mom. So you can really see that there's sort of this wide variety of the things that come to mind that are important to them that they put on this timeline as far as important things in their life. And we collected this on all the kids in these focus groups and then discussed it in terms of them walking through what their timeline was and what it meant to them. And since part of the game, as I mentioned, is the narrative of a number of years through their life, at the end point is an epilogue, which in the game will show the player how they made choices in this game and how those choices impacted on their overall outcome. So what you end up with is this epilogue, which again is sort of a representation of what happened over their life timeline, and is a collage of sort of the experiences in terms of what the choices were that they made and the different stories that they confronted and how those choices affected their overall outcome. And they are actually in the game able to go back and make changes in those choices so that that then is also reflected in their epilogue. So another mechanism we used is the photo feedback project. And this was sort of generated by the fact that we could talk to the kids about, what does your neighborhood look like? What do your friends look like? What kind of clothes do you like to wear? But we really felt like that wasn't getting at the essence of what was really important to them, how they saw things through their eyes. And we really wanted the artwork to have a level of authenticity and have meaning to these kids. So we gave them disposable cameras and essentially gave them the assignment to take photos that represented their present and future ideal and real styles and surrounding in their actual community. This included clothing, hair, jewelry, people in their lives, home, neighborhood, and that's exactly what they did. They then brought back the cameras, we developed them, and we had focus groups based on these photographs, and the kids could talk through what the different images were and why they were meaningful to them. And in addition, we used these images specifically to inform the artwork of the game. So you can see that we had hair that then translated to a hairstyle in the game. We had shoes, which translated to shoes in the game. A bedroom that translated into a player's bedroom in the game. Similarly, they took an abundance of photographs of their neighborhood, houses, stores, and you can see here that again translated from houses in their neighborhood to houses in the game. So moving on from the formative work, and there's a lot of overlap in this whole process as we moved into an extensive and quite involved pre-production period, which involved looking at proven factors in behavior change and risk reduction. And you can see some of them listed here. And from those behavioral theories, developed a number of gameplay manuals that would inform the intervention that we were including in the game. And again, further in our pre-production period was really providing this feedback between the teens and our game developers. It was highly iterative, looking at art, getting that art incorporated, revised, incorporated, and then getting feedback on the stories or the narrative. And again, you can see the kids gave feedback that, clothes are too kid-like, no, these are baggy pants, they like this guy looked too old, and all of those changes were made based on the feedback that they gave us. So in terms of how to play the game, just very briefly, and then I'm going to show you a really quick trailer. The player plays as their aspirational avatar, which is essentially a character that they create that includes all of their sort of values and goals and future desires. They take multiple trips through their life with different choices and experience the impact of those choices on their life plan. And then they can change those decisions to see the new outcomes. Those stories interface with skill-based mini-games to develop increased senses and powers. That includes things like learning better refusal skills, better negotiation skills, gaining knowledge, learning how to assess people and friends of people to see who is either a positive or a negative influence, choosing priorities in terms of how to make good decisions, and then, as I mentioned, there's the epilogue. So again, this is PLAYFORWARD Elm City Stories, and let's see if this will work. Is there somebody back there? Can you start the video? Thanks.
We didn't admit to Mr. Walker that we cheated. We didn't want to get in trouble.
I gave you two the chance to do the right thing, and you made a bad choice.
Hey, your grandma left her pills sitting here. We could take some and get stupid high and she never noticed.
Baby, I'm right outside your window. I just gotta see you. Can I come up?
How is this pressuring me?
Got it.
It's on.
Good job.
After class, we decided to tell Mr. Walker the truth.
I'm disappointed, but I'm also glad you came to me about this.
Oh, thank you. Can you? I can't, unless I can do it. So as we're coming up on finishing production tomorrow, we will then launch into a randomized controlled trial. We'll enroll 330 teens aged 11 to 14 at 5 New Haven after-school programs, randomly assign them to either play PLAYFORWARD versus a commercial, probably a series of commercial video games. Play twice weekly for 6 weeks, which will be 12 sessions of about 15 hours of gameplay, and then we'll follow them for outcomes for 24 months. And just some implications, sort of looking at the bigger picture. I think our goal is to establish novel models of evidence-based interventions for education and behavior change, to understand how best to use mobile technologies for video game development to promote positive health behaviors, to investigate the impact of serious games on social network platforms such as Facebook, to really look more at social interactions as opposed to just the individual player, and then to think about translating to other mobile technologies such as smartphones and to developing countries where there may be well, there is much greater reach. Thank you.
Let's see if I know how to do this. Oh, they're setting it up. Now, what do I have to do? Just click on this.
On next, yep.
Okay, great. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm really delighted to be here, especially if they can get my slides up. Can you be able to do it? You're going to be able to do it?
Should we switch the order so that you
I
guys
can switch to my
Okay.
iPad. Can we plug this in?
I'm not sure it's going to be checked.
Yes, it will, because we have the connector.
Oh, okay, great.
I asked for it. This is not, I'm sure this is the right one.
Thanks for your patience. We have a backup that we're trying to set up.
Is it this one or this one? Do you know?
I'm not sure.
Okay. The only problem is I can't get, it's not-
Oh, okay.
They got it?
They're good.
Great, thank you. I'm Lynn Miller. I'm delighted to be here now. And it's my pleasure to tell you about Solve It, socially optimized learning in virtual environments. I'd like to also point out my collaborators and also thank my funding agencies, including the National Institute of Mental Health. I don't know what the... Next. Great. Male-to-male sexual contact is still a leading transmission route for HIV in the United States, especially for white, black, and Hispanic MSM. This is especially problematic for younger MSM. And younger MSM may have tuned out of traditional HIV prevention interventions. There's been quite a call for more engaging interventions, and traditional interventions, however, while they often focus on cognitions and skills, neglect affect, which in the moment may lead to risk-taking despite one's best intentions. In fact, our model is based on a neuroscience model of decision-making. Like many health theories, cognition and skills matter, but unlike many health theories, emotion also matters. Affect biases decisions based on prior emotional experience of comparable real and virtual situations that can often guide automatic behaviors. Often those behaviors are quite risky. The unique goal of this intervention was to create a sex-positive intervention. We started doing this work in 1990 with various interactive technologies to create similar contextual and emotional challenges as in real life. And our focus is on self-regulation and improving and enhancing, reducing shame, which is a big factor in this population. In prior work with Solve using interactive video, there's really a whole science of this development process to build a cumulative science. This is our third RCT and our third iterative process. So there's a lot of theory underlying this, a lot of theory and research which gets embedded and implemented in a rich and situated risk script, which relies on input from each of our target audiences. When we developed the IAV, we got input from each of our three different ethnic groups for 3 different interventions, community advisory boards, and professional writers. A great deal of formative research, and much of that formative research actually gives a very different view of some of these theories. So there's quite a feedback loop here that eventually led us to the longitudinal assessments. And we always include manipulation checks of the things that we think we're trying to change to see whether or not we change those things, as well as whether or not we have success in our outcomes. For separate IAV for Latino, white, and black for young MSM, MSM assumed the role of a character on a virtual date with an attractive other. They may contextualize virtual decisions that guide how the narrative proceeds. Ethnically matched virtual guides and models instead of face-to-face ones of each of 3 groups of MSM, and these guides pop up when the user makes a risky choice. We developed this self-regulatory narrative circuit starting about 1990, and it's always involved what we call an ICAP process. So we interrupt the virtual risky choice and challenge it. We challenge beliefs, attitudes, and we acknowledge, and this is quite different from other interventions, we acknowledge MSM's attraction and their desires for this man. It's a very sex-positive intervention. It's the only intervention I know of that's actually successfully reduced shame. Acknowledge and clarify multiple goals, such as intimacy desires, and provide a means to deal with these various goals and motives and emotions. Then the user has a second chance to be risky or safe, and all these choices are recorded. At the end, there's a recap of what you could have done differently and how you could have done it, so that we always optimize a safe sex narrative. For our findings from a longitudinal RCT from this work, we found that we got unprotected anal intercourse act reduction over 3 months in the IV versus control, but only for our 18 to 24-year-olds. We get a very similar pattern for number of sexual partners with UAI over 3 months. What significantly changed pre and post were all the cognitive and skill factors we expected to change, and also shame reduction. One of the things we looked at is from baseline to immediate post, those changes and how they predicted at the individual level, changing UAI over 3 months. The only variable at the individual level that was predictive was actually a reduction in shame, which I think is very interesting. The limitation of IAV is that research suggests there's more change if the characters are similar to the self. So we designed in Solve It each of these characters where you can create all the skin textures and colors that you want, and eye color, clothing, and so forth. Another problem was that the guides and mentors were restricted. In the IAV, we had peer guides. In Solve It, we have what we call the virtual future self. So the character creates their own self-character, and then that self-character we take behind the scenes and age And that aged self-character becomes your virtual future self, who's scaffolding your progress in the game. There are a number of design challenges. The one I want to mention is cross-platform flexibility. So when we chose our game platform a number of years ago, we chose the Unity game platform, which works with a variety of laptops, smartphones, tablets, you name it. Our overview of our process here is we customize the character, the users customize a character, they hear about and get ready for a date, they meet the virtual future self, they're in their apartments, they can take condoms or not, and then they go to one of two levels of the game. And there's also recaps involved, as we've had before. So the goal is to meet a guy, go home with him, and negotiate safer sex, and the guides will interrupt you with an ICAP process with messages that we've designed and tested for our purposes. Okay, this is the game. Could you click on it? Oops, not that one, the one before. So you're going on your first date. You're at this friend's party, and hopefully we'll see this negotiation. This is actually.
This guy always throws the most fabulous parties. So, cocktail? Bottoms up. Damn, there are so many hot guys here. I choose that one. Ta-ta.
So you're going for these guys with the diamonds.
Hi, I'm Steve. You always start conversations like this? I flirted with the host without knowing. Ended up staying the night. You? I wish I had seen that. A bunch of people. You? Well, I guess I get to play host then. Drink? Let's dance. You have really beautiful eyes. I can't stop looking at them. I'm so attracted to you right now. I want to have some fun tonight. Get you naked. Oh, well, this is my party. We'll have the place to ourselves soon. Thanks. How about a drink?
Hey, slow down there, buddy. Next time, instead of having so much to drink, why not take it easy and keep a clear head?
No, but my roommate's out of town. I have to say, you were by far the hottest guy around tonight. Can't wait to see you out of those clothes.
Hey, I know this seems like the worst time to interrupt, but before things get too hot, you should really talk about using a condom. You know safe sex is the way to go, but make sure he does. And yeah, mutual masturbation is safe. Oral sex is relatively safe. And anal sex can be safe too if those condoms are used correctly. So stand your ground.
I'll make you feel so much better if we don't use a condom. What? You think I have HIV? That's cool. I'm down with that.
I'm glad you agreed on having safer sex. If you don't talk about this now, it might be harder to protect yourself later. And remember, if you want to have anal sex, and I know you do, make sure you use a condom each and every time.
Okay, now these are the sex scenes, and once again, the risk takes place in these very moments. This is one of the few interventions that's designed to have some level of realistic sexual arousal, and it is very explicit. So given that this is being potentially broadcast, I'm going to skip this part, but if you're interested, I'll start it. Get started just a little bit, give you the flavor of this. But this is very explicit. Oops. And if you're interested, please see me. This is one of the most difficult things to animate. Okay. Such a tease. This is the recaps. And so these are recaps about all the things that happen if you make decisions of various sorts and what the consequences of these things might be. Our agents are autonomous and they're intelligent. What this means is that behind every agent in here, there is a psych-sim agent, which has, each of these agents can be programmed to have different kinds of goals for themselves and others that they try to pursue in the negotiation. What this means is that changing the parameters here changes your whole interpersonal space of the kinds of challenges that these characters will present to you. These agents have a range of possible actions that they can take, and all of this is from basic research. These choices also are related to attachment styles, which we find we have most of the men who are very risky, who are in our studies, are not secure men. So we map those attachment styles onto those choices. In psych-sim, agents have theory of mind, realized as distributions over beliefs about themselves and the real and virtual characters. What this means is that each character has a theory of mind about themselves, and they have a theory of mind about the user, and they have a theory of mind about the user's theory of mind about them. And all of those things in the interaction influence what the agent does. Solvent status. We have a national recruitment for 18 to 24-year-old young MSM, and testing over the web. This is for Black, White, and Latino MSM, and a few others. The design is an RCT, longitudinal, over 6 months. We collect baseline measures, randomized into game and waitlist control. We have an immediate post set of measures, and 3- and 6-month follow-ups. We've just completed all of our baseline data. We have 979 MSM completed nationally, and we have looked at about a quarter of those. We will complete our 6-month in sometime late spring. But right now we have 80% retention that we are thrilled about. From baseline to immediate post, we are getting increases in self-efficacy, behavioral intentions, and this new variable, consideration of future consequences, which is also up, which we think is contributed to by our virtual future self, and shame reduction. So we're looking pretty good. And SOLVE is promising intervention for changing risky sexual decision-making for MSM nationally with rapid dissemination using mobile technologies. With Unity, it makes cross-platform very easy. Interactive and intelligent technologies offer a tremendous promise for developing a test bed and a cumulative prevention science to go from rapid science to rapid dissemination nationally. So what's the future? Well, we're currently trying to model cases, and so we can look at the patterns of choices in the virtual game. We found in the past that virtual choices map onto real-life choices. And we're going to be using our computational models to see if we can model and anticipate the choices of the users in the game by setting parameters for the user. That we actually design things with this in mind. And we're currently also funded by NIDA to take our game and to put men in the scanner using the game. And we're simultaneously modeling that using a decision-making model that Steve Reed and I and a number of other colleagues developed. And this is actually a neural network model that can also be used in agents. And the decision-making, the idea here is to use this biologically inspired model of personality to see if we can map onto what's going on in the brain in terms of an approach and avoid system and whether we can validate our model, but also whether we can use the behavior from the neuroscientists to advance our understanding of decision-making in actual social interaction, virtual social interaction, and how that maps onto the computational modeling. So in the future, we'd like to use the computational modeling so that it's possible to think about this distributed nationally. That's it. Thanks.
Good afternoon. I'm Karen Phillips, and thank you for this opportunity this afternoon to talk to you a little bit about a project we're working on looking at smartphone-delivered mobile HIV risk reduction in opioid-dependent individuals. I'd like to acknowledge my mentors, Dr. Preston and Dr. Epstein, also the bioinformatics section, as well as our Archway Clinic staff and patients. Also to acknowledge that this research was done as part of the intramural research program at the National Institute on Drug Abuse. So for background, evidence has shown that computer-delivered HIV education has been preferred over counselor-delivered education and has resulted in significant increases in risk reduction behaviors. However, little is known about smartphone-delivered mobile HIV education in regards to its ability to possibly increase knowledge and decrease risk behavior. So we wanted to develop and deploy an interactive mobile HIV risk reduction software program to deliver education on smartphones and determine whether it reduced both risk and increased knowledge. So what we've done is we've developed modules using video components of pre-existing evidence-based programs. The DEBI program is the disseminated, it's the dissemination of evidence-based interventions. And what that does, it's collected programs throughout the country that have evidence-based behind them in HIV risk reduction and made them publicly available for people to use in a variety of clinical settings. We chose to use the Smart in the City program, which is developed by the CDC, and this was originally developed to be a video component in the waiting rooms of STD clinics and HIV clinics throughout the country. And what we did was we took the 5 to 10 minute video component and we added 2 sets of questionnaires. The first was an 11-item acceptability questionnaire, and the next is a 3-item knowledge questionnaire. We downloaded a new module onto people's smartphones every week, and we asked participants to view it at least once during that week, but multiple times if they so chose. And they viewed the module and the video, and after 75% of the video component, the questionnaires would appear. Prior week's modules were moved to the library so people could view them repeatedly if they desired after the week of its dissemination. So this is a video, if you wouldn't mind running the video. This just gives you a sense of what the video module looked like, or parts of it.
Condoms. There are a lot to choose from, but look carefully and you'll find the right one. A rainbow of colors, mouth-watering flavors, all sizes and shapes. Allergic to latex? Try a non-latex condom. A condom for women. Lubricated. And even ultra-sensitive. When the lights go out, some even glow in the dark. Is there a condom for everyone? You bet.
So the video component included cartoons such as that, as well as sort of a novella that included real characters filmed in real situations. There were 3 different video scenarios, and I'll describe those a bit later. The acceptability questions, there were 11 of them. The first 3 asked sort of about how the functionality of the unit. Could you play, see, hear, and understand it? The next questions asked a little bit about whether or not you learned something new, or if it reminded you about something that you had already known about HIV risk reduction. We asked about how it applied to situations in your own life. And then we asked about the entertainment level of the module. We asked about length of the module. And then the last 3 questions compared the video-based smartphone module to a booklet, a computer-based module, or a pure text-based module, which would be also on the smartphone. The effectiveness questions, there were 3 for each module. You can see your questions 1.1 through 1.3 would go with the first module. And what happened was when they answered the questions, such as the first question, do you always have symptoms with an STD? The correct answer is no. If they answered no, then it would appear on the screen, that is correct, and it would say people with STDs, and there would be a little bit of an explanation. If they answered yes, which was the incorrect answer, they'd be told that it was incorrect, but they'd be given the information on what the correct answer was and why. And this was just an opportunity for us to reinforce the kind of learning kernel, both with a correct and an incorrect answer. Our outcomes. So we defined a priori acceptability as a median score of less than or equal to 2.5 on the acceptability questions. And these were all rated on a Likert scale from 1 to 5. Very easy to very hard for the usability questions, and very effective to not at all effective for some of the other questions. We defined effectiveness or knowledge gained as greater than 80% of participants scoring at least greater than 65% on the knowledge questions. So when we looked at our data, we found that we had an average of age of 42, that they had been paid to work for about 7 out of the last 30 days. 56% were African American, 78% were male, 53% were never married, 6% were HIV positive, and 67% were in methadone treatment. Now, this whole population was in treatment, so that means the remaining percentage were in buprenorphine treatment. So a little bit about their substance abuse history. Here we look at alcohol, heroin, opiates, and cocaine use in the past 30 days, as well as over their lifetime. And you can see that they have an average heroin lifetime use of about 12 years and an average cocaine use of about 8 years. We also looked at route of administration for heroin, opiates, and cocaine. And primary route for heroin was intranasally with 67%, the remaining being IV administration. Opiates were PO with almost 80%. And the main route of cocaine administration was 50% who were smoking the cocaine. 33% were using it intranasally and 17% intravenously. So looking at some of their baseline HIV risk, this is from the HIV Risk Behavior Taking Scale by Dark et al. It is comprised of 11 questions. 6 of them are related to IV drug use related risk, and 5 of them are related to sexual risk. The original questionnaire is asked over the last month. We did modify that, and we asked it over a different time frame of the last 2 weeks. And what you can see here is that the major IV drug use related risk factor, about 38% admitted to using IV drugs in the last 2 weeks. However, it seemed that they were using needles in a somewhat safer manner, in that none of them had endorsed using an old or previously used needle. None of them endorsed having people use the needle before them or after them. As far as cleaning the needles, again, there is a large percentage, 2/3, that not only that didn't reuse their needles, but of those, the remaining said that 33% said they cleaned their needles every time, and about 33% sometimes cleaned with bleach. Looking at the sexual risk related questions, we can see that the number of sexual partners, about 6% endorsed 3 to 5 sexual partners over the last 2 weeks. And 64% said that they never use condoms with their regular partner. Condoms with casual partner was much higher. condoms when paid for sex was also much higher, but there's still almost 10% that never used condoms when they paid for sex. And none in this population endorsed anal sex over the last 2 weeks. So these are our acceptability questionnaires. We're looking at videos 1, 2, and 3 separately, and then a cumulative score across all 3 videos. And you can see, just reminding you that our a priori cutoff was less than or equal to 2.5 on the score. So most of these met that for acceptability across all videos, as well as each individual video. The exceptions would be here in the apply to you category, where we had 2.5, which is right at our cutoff, but you can see the standard the interquartile ranges do encompass our cutoff. Now, part of that seems to have may be related to the content of the video. So you can see that video 1 and 3 had higher scores here, which meant that the participants felt that it was less applicable to their personal situations. And video 1 involved a heterosexual couple where there was infidelity. Video 2 involved a new heterosexual relationship. And video 3 was a heterosexual married couple where there was same-sex infidelity. And so we're going to look a little bit further at the numbers here, because the thought was that from some of the qualitative data that maybe the people were relating to this question as I'm not in that situation, and that's why that doesn't apply to me. I'm not in a relationship where there's not monogamy or something along those lines. Entertainment also was borderline. While again the score was lower, the interquartile range does include the concern about our cutoff level. So here again, it seems mainly driven by video 3, which had a much higher score, and that did involve the vignette where there was men having sex with men, and this may have had some factor in this particular population. 72% thought the length was just right. Only 11% thought they'd prefer text-based on the smartphone rather than the video-based, which we provided. Only 9% thought that a booklet would have been better. And 32% reported computer-based might be better. I think that's largely due to just the nature of the screen size, but again, this is something we can look into a little bit further once we get some of that qualitative data looked at. Effectiveness, so again, our cutoff here was that greater than 80% of people had to have a score of 65% or greater, and you can see here that the lowest score on any of these was 83%. So we well exceeded that cutoff level with 93%, 100% of people scoring 93% overall on the knowledge questions. So in we found that our video-based mobile HIV risk reduction education delivered via smartphone seems to be acceptable, and it may increase HIV risk reduction behaviors and increase knowledge. Future studies are needed with pre-intervention assessments and random assignment to confirm these findings. And so our next steps are to take some of this pilot data. We're going to develop 2 more modules of 3 videos, a total of 9 modules, I should say. One set of modules is going to be on hepatitis C, and the other is going to be related to other sexually transmitted infections. And we're going to deliver that in a randomized controlled fashion, with one group receiving the video-based modules, and the control group is going to receive the same education but in a printed booklet form. Thank you.
My name is Sean Young, and I'm an assistant professor in Department of Family Medicine and Center for Behavior and Addiction Medicine at UCLA. And before starting, so just to get an idea of how to tailor the talk, how many of you are researchers? Okay, almost everyone. And organizations, corporations, entrepreneurs? Okay, and policymakers or funders? Okay. Anyone else? Did I miss anything? Yeah. Okay. Today I'm going to talk about using social networking for mixed methods health research, mixed methods HIV prevention research. So this is primarily about methods, but I'm also going to present some data on social networking, HIV prevention, online communities. This is the older slide, but the point's the same. So social networking technologies are an engaging platform, especially among at-risk populations, and this makes them technologies which can be used for HIV prevention research. So this talk is going to focus on mixed methods HIV prevention, and when I say mixed methods, I mean both quantitative or survey statistical methods as well as qualitative or observational methods. So why are social networking technologies potentially good platforms for mixed methods HIV prevention research? So as I mentioned, they're popular technologies and engaging. You can document conversations on group walls. So for example, with an HIV prevention social networking group, the conversations, as you guys know, are documented chronologically, and so you can take that content and upload it into a qualitative analysis software to be able to analyze the content and themes within the groups. The groups can be used for online interviews. So for example, you can direct public interview questions at groups and be able to document their responses. And then finally, as the true mixed method, you can merge and analyze those qualitative topics and themes along with quantitative data that you might have, such as self-report questionnaires. So today, the aims, what I'm going to show you are, can we use mixed methods to determine participant acceptance for using online social networking as a platform for HIV prevention education, for understanding the topics that participants discuss among HIV prevention online social networking groups, and can we link participants' HIV prevention related conversations or their intentions with actual behavior change. These data are part of the intervention group from a randomized controlled trial looking at whether Facebook can be used for peer-delivered HIV prevention among African American and Latino MSM, primarily African American and Latino MSM. And this was a 12-week peer leader diffusion of innovations intervention. This is the larger intervention, or the larger study, where we recruited 112 Los Angeles-based men who have sex with men, and peer leaders presented HIV prevention to participants compared to a control group to see if we could increase requests for home-based HIV testing, reduce self-reported sexual risk behaviors, and reduce HIV-related stigma. So these data from today, the aims as part of this study from that larger group of data are to see, can we use quantitative and qualitative methods to assess acceptance for using social networking as a platform for HIV-related discussions? And an example of that is, so will participants voluntarily use Facebook groups to talk about HIV-related topics? In the study, peer leaders presented HIV prevention information to participants. Participants were not obligated to respond. So an acceptance measure is, were participants willing to respond to that information when they were not obligated to? Also, we'll look at the topics that participants discussed within those groups. And that will be a qualitative analysis method. And as the mixed method analysis, we will look to link and see whether participants' HIV prevention-related discussions are associated with actual requests for HIV testing. So these are the baseline demographics of the participants. Participants were primarily African American Latino, about 60% Latino MSM, 30% African American MSM, and they were relatively educated. Most of them had at least high school education. So as far as participant acceptance, we found that participants found the intervention to be acceptable and engaging. We found over the 12 weeks 485 conversations from participants that were related to HIV prevention. And this is important because in other research that's being done, it's difficult so far to be able to engage participants in online communities related to HIV prevention. About 15% of conversations were related to HIV prevention and testing, 6% were related to HIV knowledge. And as an example of an HIV prevention conversation, one participant said, I'll just read a couple of these, "I tend to feel that despite it all, being a part of the group would inspire each of us to get tested. I agree that it's a personal responsibility, but on some level, I feel that it's a social one as well. Despite whatever your reasoning, it will remain a private matter unless you choose to divulge it within the group. But for all those who haven't, knowing is worth it in the end. Let's just do it." And then for in HIV knowledge, a participant said, "HIV is 90 nanometers in size, almost as big as a pit on a CD, and it affects the red and white blood cells." And this was in response to a peer leader posting a link about HIV. Whoops. That's not the end of the presentation. Okay. Okay, next one. So we looked at the topics and themes that participants were discussing over the 12-week period, and these are broken down by 4-week periods. And as we see, the intervention appeared to be effective in, over time, friendly conversation began decreasing. As you can see, it decreased from each 4-week period, while HIV prevention and testing conversations increased over time. And then finally, for the mixed method analysis, we find that compared to participants who did not talk about HIV prevention within the group, those who did discuss HIV prevention topics had 9 times the odds or 11 times the odds in a multivariate regression of requesting an actual HIV testing kit. So their discussions about HIV prevention among the group participants were associated with actual behavior change. And this was controlling for age and race. So study limitations, this was a sample of 57 MSM, and they were Los Angeles-based MSM. However, we are currently replicating the study in Peru among Peruvian MSM and finding similar results. And although this was focused on HIV prevention, we found that these results can also generalize to general health and other areas. So the study suggests that social networking groups can be used for mixed methods HIV prevention. The group conversations were associated with actual behavior change of HIV testing requests, and the study is important as these populations are at high risk. I'd like to thank my co-author, David Jaganoff, is here. David, stand up, take a bow. And I'd like to thank the NIMH.
We have time for a few questions, actually for any of the 4 speakers.
So my name is Jody Swerber. I work at JSI Health in Boston. On what you just presented, because we actually, I'm helping out with a similar, but it's more of a longitudinal for underserved transgender population, so often hidden, marginalized. And we also are using Facebook, and we opted to go with a secret group because of the security around that. And I have a lot of questions. We worked through a lot of questions regarding, you know, who can see what, and Facebook has this information, as opposed to us having the information, this real like control and concern and trying to be aware of that. So could you speak a little bit to how you sort of went through that thought process and which way you actually chose to go with what you collected?
Sure. This is probably for more detail we should talk after because it's a long conversation. But so it was part of a larger randomized control trial which has 1-year follow-up. So it's longitudinal study, and these were private secret groups on Facebook, and that was very important. We found that participants initially also, they were recruited, this was in 2010 we began recruiting, and so there were some issues around Facebook at the time, still exists, about security, and so it was really important to be able to both show participants how to go through Facebook to change their security settings. We had a unique population where we had a lot of participants who wanted to remain discreet. A lot of them had not disclosed that they were MSM, but they were linked to family and friends on Facebook, and their family and friends did not know that they were MSM. So this was really important, and we had to stress this, had to let them know about Facebook and keep up. One of the things that's important that I didn't talk about, but I actually wrote a paper on this about using social networking for HIV prevention, is we were linked to Facebook to be able to understand what are their upcoming changes they're going to be making. That was really important to make participants feel more comfortable and to stay ahead of the curve on things. So it's important to, if you're working with a technology platform, to understand what kind of changes they might be making in the future.
Any other questions? Yeah, Susan. Hi, I'm Jessica Williamson. I'm a graduate student at GW in public health. But I had a question about the Play to Prevent program. And so obviously we're doing a lot of efforts to make this program really specific and this particular population, and I'm wondering about generalizability. You mentioned that a little bit at the end about looking to see whether or not this is something you could use in different populations. And so I was just interested in hearing what you have to say about, you know, once you've tested this in New Haven, where you would intend to go with it afterwards.
So that's a great question, and a question that we get quite often. So there's sort of two parts of that. One is that as far as Play to Prevent goes, the focus really is on evidence-based games for prevention in youth and young adults. So that could translate to a whole, myriad other things, drug and alcohol abuse, shoplifting, gambling, unsafe driving, sort of. So in terms of generalizability, the hope with this first project was to really create a process and a model for developing these types of games. And that's sort of what Play to Prevent is about. As far as Play Forward, which I think was sort of the second question about kind of getting it out there, and that's the question that we get asked a lot, and that is, that's a very interesting question, and for any NIH folks in the room, is a question about, having funding to do these types of projects in terms of that last phase of dissemination and really building that into the project. So at this point, as we're finishing production and moving into testing, concurrent with that, we'll really be thinking about what the best dissemination plan is. The goal is to try to get it out to, once we've really evaluated it, getting it out to the groups that really need it, whether it be school-based groups, after-school-based groups, and really figuring out how best to do that. So that's sort of a work in progress, but obviously a really important part of it.
Any other questions? All right, well, thank you for coming and enjoy the rest of the summit.